Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, here to talk about the upcoming light heavyweight championship fight in Canada between one of Canada's favorite fighters, and that's light heavyweight champion Jean Pascal, and he's fighting American Bernard Hopkins, 45-year-old Bernard Hopkins, right? Understand that Pascal is much more popular in Canada than Bernard Hopkins is in the United States. Hopkins' recent fight against Roy Jones got a pay-per-view crowd the size of about 1/10 of what Floyd Mayweather got when he fought Shane Mosley, right? Hopkins, as big as his reputation is, he's not a fan favorite. He's going to be even less of a fan favorite in Canada because of the age difference as well. Hopkins isn't just over 40. Believe it or not, Hopkins is closer to 50 than he is 40. Hopkins is 45 years old, right? Jean Pascal is a young man who's in his prime. Pascal has the faster foot speed. You notice that from his fight with Chad Dawson, where he had Chad Dawson, who fights out of a defensive shell, looking like he was carrying luggage around the ring, right? Because as Chad moved around, and keep in mind, I consider Chad to be boxing's best technical fighter, but as Chad moved around the ring, Pascal was able to stay outside, come in when he wanted, go back outside. Dawson just wasn't fluid enough to catch up with Pascal on the ropes, right? So Pascal is gifted with the much faster feet, even though Hopkins is a mobile fighter. And I would say Pascal is also gifted with the much faster hands, right? Now, all of that said, and knowing that the casinos have Hopkins as a plus 240 underdog, which, if you work out the math, means that they're giving Hopkins less than a 30% chance of winning this fight, right? They believe that if these guys fought 3.4 times, Jean Pascal would win 2.4 of those bouts, and Hopkins would only win once, right? That's what a plus 240 means, right? Given all of that, I believe, as a fan, that the most likely outcome of this fight is for Bernard Hopkins to win the fight. As a gambler, I believe the play is to take Hopkins to win at plus 240 or higher. Check your casino odds, straddled against Jean Pascal by decision. Right? Understand, Pascal is the crowd favorite. Understand, Pascal is fighting in Canada. Understand that Pascal is an expert at throwing flurries, whether they're meaningful or not, that look good to judges. Understand that Pascal, even though the last fight against Chad Dawson was stopped, Pascal was well ahead on the scorecards, including my scorecard. Understand that Pascal has won decisions over Adrian Diacanu in Canada. Pascal is a fighter who, with hand speed and foot speed, looks good at first glance. But let's talk about this. I encourage everyone to take a look at the 8th and ninth rounds of Jean Pascal against journeyman fighter Omar Pittman. This fight is on YouTube, and you're going to see that Pascal, like Roy Jones, who he fights a very similar style to, has technical defects. Pascal hides the defects with quick hands and quick feet. But Omar Pittman figured out how to time Pascal every time Pascal backed away from him, because Pascal, of course, wouldn't put his hands up, right? Because Pascal throws to the head and the body and is flashy and throws combinations, understand that that is an opportunity for an opponent who's a counterpuncher, because they're looking at openings, and Pascal is not gifted defensively. His defense consists of his feet. And so Hopkins, who just beat a Pascal clone, in Roy Jones will know exactly how to time Jean Pascal. He has to look out for Pascal's left hook, and then he'll know how to time Pascal as Pascal inevitably tries to back out. I believe Pascal's style is made for a counterpuncher, and Hopkins, style-wise, won't be carrying around the defensive shell luggage that Chad Dawson did in his fight. Let me also point out, too, that Hopkins is 45. The secret to Hopkins, in my opinion, is that Hopkins can only fight half of every round, right? He's looking for opportunities to catch a breather. In the 10th round of his fight against Roy Jones, he got one. I guess Jones grazed his private parts below the belt, and the referee gave Hopkins an opportunity to rest and, go forward. He pulled the same stunt against Joe Calzaghe, but understand he doesn't even need to pace himself against Jean Pascal because unlike the guys who recently beat him, the two matches were Jermaine Taylor and the match with Calzaghe, right? Unlike those fighters, Jean Pascal is actually an intermittent fighter. Pascal actually likes to be chased in the fight. He wants you coming forward, right? He wants you pursuing him, kind of like Manny Pacquiao, right? What he doesn't want is he doesn't want to have to be the lead in the fight, even though he's a lead puncher. In other words, he wants to use his superior foot speed to have you come forward pursuing him so he can then back around, back away around the ring, and while you're coming forward unprepared, he wants to be able to, just like Manny Pacquiao, just like Roy Jones, he wants to be able to lunge in with a lead hook, with a lead combination, hit you with a combination when you're coming forward unprepared for it, then he wants to back out. If you get him up on the ropes, he wants to time you. So on the ropes, he can counterpunch you. He's a counterpuncher on the ropes. Pascal's a thinking man's fighter. He's a counterpuncher on the ropes, so he wants you to believe you have him trapped. Then he wants to unload big hooks on you. He has knocked out more than one opponent who has gotten him on the ropes. Pascal literally then times it, throws a big hook. Here's the problem. He's fighting a better chess player. This is literally a match between more talent, right? That's Pascal. He's faster, he's younger, better feet, more hand speed, throws fluid combinations. This is a fight between more talent and more skill. And Bernard Hopkins, in my opinion, is the much more skilled fighter, right? Understand, Hopkins is so skilled that fight fans hate him because his fights look like wrestling matches. It looks like he's just clutching and holding guys. The problem with Hopkins is fight fans view the sport as an event, right? Nothing happened before the fight. You show up to see the fight. You want to see things you understand in the fight. You want to see hand speed. You want to see volume. You want to see punches landed and things like that. But understand that Hopkins, that's not Hopkins. To appreciate the beauty of Hopkins, you actually have to view boxing as a continuum. So, you have to know, for example, how Winky Wright, a Hopkins opponent, looked against Shane Mosley, future Boxing Hall of Famer, right? Kept Mosley at the end of a jab. You thought that Winky Wright's jab was the best punch ever invented in boxing, right? You have to know how Winky Wright did against Felix Trinidad, and all of these fights are up on YouTube, right? Kept him at the end of a jab, beautifully counterpunched him, had a defensive shell. You have to know that. So when you watch Hopkins, and keep in mind, Hopkins' fights don't start at chapter 1, they start in the second act, right? They start at chapter 5. You have to know that Winky Wright has a great jab that great fighters couldn't get by to appreciate Hopkins versus Winky Wright, where Hopkins neutralizes that jab from the opening bell and has Winky Wright completely lunging at him in vain, while Hopkins then proceeded to take apart Wright and take apart his defensive shell and to prevent a counterpuncher from countering him by not throwing punches at specific times in that fight. Right? If you knew who Winky Wright was before the fight, then Hopkins's fight against Winky Wright, quite frankly, is a boxing masterpiece. I'm expecting the same thing to happen here to Jean Pascal. Pascal is a fighter with technical flaws, right? He looks great. He's young. He throws explosive combinations. If you're into boxing as an event, he's an excellent fighter. I give him much respect for fighting tough fights. He fought Froch when he was undefeated. He fought Adrian Diaconu when he was undefeated. He fought Chad Dawson when he's undefeated. It's hard to root against a warrior. Here's the problem. When he goes over to the ropes hoping to catch someone with a counter left hook, Bernard Hopkins is not going to go over to the ropes with him. In other words, Hopkins' fights aren't just about punch combinations and stuff like that. It's literally about his strategy in the ring, the opportunities he's going to give an opponent. When Pascal leaps in and tries to throw combinations to the head and to the body like he did against Chad Dawson, unlike Dawson, who was constantly surprised and unprepared for these intermittent bursts, Hopkins is going to be trying to encourage the intermittent bursts so he can land, counters, so he can literally hit Pascal when Pascal's on his way back and is literally defenseless, and so he could wrestle with Pascal, who recently had shoulder surgery. His shoulder kept popping out against Diaconu, right? He's going to wrestle Pascal. He's going to tie up one of Pascal's hands. He's going to do something nobody else has done to Pascal, and that's fight inside on Pascal. I believe if Hopkins decides to turn into Andre Ward, I believe he should be able to treat Pascal like Andre Ward treated Alan Green once Pascal's feet slow down midway through this fight. Right? I believe that only Hopkins can fight inside in this fight. I don't believe Pascal can fight inside in this fight. I believe that Pascal is defensively deficient and hides it behind superior foot movement. I believe Hopkins is going to show us that. And even though Pascal is the better athlete with more speed, understand that Hopkins has been there and done that. He just beat a better athlete in Roy Jones. He gave Calzaghe arguably the toughest fight of Calzaghe's career. I know Calzaghe people are going to write me about Robin Reed. All I can say is compare the Reed fight to the Hopkins fight. I think Hopkins gave Calzaghe the toughest fight. I believe that fight was a split decision. Understand, only Hopkins scored a knockdown in that fight. Right? Hopkins has spent his entire career neutralizing fighters with superior speed. Keep in mind, he's the only man other than Manny Pacquiao to stop Oscar De La Hoya. And let's remember, Oscar was able to quit against Pacquiao. With Hopkins, he could not beat the count. Right? So to sum up, as I'm out of time here, I believe that the play here is Hopkins to win the fight, especially if they're going to give you a greater than plus 200, straddled against Jean Pascal by decision. There is a chance that hand speed rules the day and that the hometown fighter is able to jump ahead on the scorecards before his fans. What I don't see happening in this fight is Pascal beating Hopkins by KO, nor do I see Pascal dominating Hopkins. In fact, I believe that Hopkins will be technically superior to Pascal on fight night. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching.